And the House is now voting on a $1.2 trillion government funding package, leaving little time for the Senate to take up the measure before tonight's partial shutdown deadline. President Biden has said he is ready to sign that bill and hopefully avert a shutdown if it's approved by Congress in time. ABC's Jay O'Brien joins me from Capitol Hill for more. Jay, so far some right Republicans have voiced opposition to this bill. So how's it looking so far?
Well, it looks at the moment, Diane, that it is on track to pass. It's getting close. It's not quite at the threshold it needs. We're in those final minutes of a vote where there are some Republicans who have not voted yet. And one of the questions that Mike Johnson is facing, frankly, and it looks like he might not get it if I look down at my vote tally here, but if he'll get a majority of Republicans to back this measure, he needs 110 to have a majority of his party support him. If not, that would be a rebuke to the Speaker. A majority of Republicans would say, we don't like this funding package that you negotiated with Democrats and put on the floor here. But it looks on track to pass only because there are about 6 Democrats who are still not voting. They're being held back. There are 285 yay votes. They need 288 to pass this. And so in theory, if 3 of those Democrats vote for it, then this would pass. But it still would be stinging to Johnson because he didn't get a majority of Republicans. That's the one headline. There was another headline emerging that is gaining a lot of steam and frankly becoming even more significant, which is that Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican of Georgia, far-right member, Trump ally, has filed what is called a motion to vacate. That is that procedural mechanism that called for a vote to oust Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. She has filed it on the floor. It's unclear what legislative tactic she has used to file it, but if it's what's called a privilege resolution, then it would mean that there would need to be a vote in 2 legislative days, which in Congress's current calendar would be mid-April, on whether or not Mike Johnson can be booted from his job. She has offered that resolution because she and a lot of far-right conservatives are very opposed to this spending package. They are opposed to the compromises that Johnson made with Democrats, and it goes to show you the level of control, or lack thereof, frankly, that Mike Johnson has in his party right now.
So, Jay, what are the sticking points in this bill, and what happens now as it faces the Senate? Even if it does pass the House, how does it stand in the Senate?
And it looks like while we were talking, Diane, they have moved on and that measure has passed. That package of government funding measures has passed. Again, before I get into your question on the Senate, what this is, remember, is it's funding a portion of the federal government. A few weeks back, they passed funding for some of the federal government, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Justice, et cetera. This package of bills was funding for the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, some of the stickier policy issues. Passing the House means it goes over to the Senate, and the Senate would pass this legislation. They have the votes to pass this. The question facing the Senate now is how quickly can they pass this? The Senate is a body that operates on everybody getting along and everybody wanting to do things in a timely manner. So if there are some further right Republican senators who feel so inspired that they want to gum up the works of this, throw sand in the gears of this process, they could drag this vote out into the weekend, which means there would be a partial government shutdown, not of that much of a significant impact because it would only affect the weekend, but certainly they could procedurally drag this out and technically trigger that partial shutdown.
So, Jay, what comes next, and what happens if this bill doesn't make it to the president's desk by midnight?
Well, if it doesn't make it to the president's desk by midnight, if there are those procedural hang-ups in the Senate that I was just talking about, it means there would be a partial shutdown. Again, a partial shutdown on a Saturday or a Sunday where the federal government services are not that robust would not be as big of an impact as a shutdown that lingered into the weekdays and certainly lingered several days, if not weeks, as we've seen in the past. So that would happen. But again, it's really up to the Senate and, frankly, Senate Republicans if they can wrangle their party to get this done on an expedited basis.
All right, Jay.